Welcome back to the French Rugby Podcast with me, Tim Groves, ex-Scotland international and adopted Frenchman Johnny BT, and reigning top 14 champion England international Henry Thomas is joining us shortly as well for a chat about swapping the Premiership for the top 14 and striking gold straight away. First, though, I know it's been another mad week, Johnny. It's that time of year for both of us.
Yep.
But I've got to pull us both up, I suppose, on something after we were full of excuses last week. We said we're going to plan around the podcast, etc., etc. It's Friday, right? When this is coming out. What time do you call this?
I blame the guest, mate. Mate, it's been bananas. It's always the same at this time, but like Friday, I was doing the 20s, France, Scotland, which was a bit one-sided. Saturday was Canal Plus and Viaplay for top 14 games. Sunday was Stade de France. Day job Monday. Basically didn't sleep all weekend, so only just catching up now. So yeah, apologies again. It's coming out on a Friday, which is embarrassing. But yeah, it's nothing to do with you or I blame Henry, so it's all his fault. And you can tell him that when he comes on in a second.
It's just nice to hear someone that's busier than me, Johnny. So you're all over the place.
All over the place, mate. It's great fun, but it's a hectic time of year. You're not happy with me. My wife's not happy with me. My kids don't know what I look like. It's all the same, but it is what it is.
I am the least of your worries out of that trio.
You're right, you are.
You were in Paris, so we should have a little chat about it. We won't dwell on it too much because it's a good few days afterwards, but you were pitch side and up in commentary at the Stade de France. So give us an overview of the atmosphere, the kind of ebbs and flows, especially obviously the two red cards.
The spectacle was right up there. I'm not sure what it was like watching from home, but it was quite dramatic in the stadium and that everyone was really getting into it. People looking each other around, like us sitting on the comms deck thinking, what is going on here? It was absolute mayhem, and it was a psychological roller coaster for everyone. Grant Gilchrist hit his red card, and essentially everyone thinks that's the game over because that's what we've seen. If anyone cops a red card after 5 minutes, and as a player yourself, you know, if you're on the field, you're like, oh shit, like that's the game gone, boys. Like, what are we going to do now? You obviously stick it in, you dig it out, you're super brave and you try, but you know, statistically, the chance of you winning it is gone, and everyone in the crowd knows that as well. So for then 5 minutes later for Mohamed Haouas to cop his red as well, and for completely different reasons. I mean, everyone was almost in disbelief for the unnecessary nature for it. Like with Gilco, you can understand because it's a kick chase, you're coming from 30 meters. Anthony Jelonch has got a 50-meter run up, you're trying to have a big collision and stop him dead. I get it, but that one's missed time. But for Mohamed Haouas, like, if you're a player, you're thinking, mate, if we just keep 15 people on the field, this game should be a cakewalk. That's what every one of his teammates is thinking. So you know that every maul, every scrum, you're going to overload in defense. It should be super hard for Scotland. But that's it, a brain fart, essentially, from something that didn't need to happen. And he gets his walking orders. So that whole element was absolutely crazy. By that stage as well, Scotland then are 20 minutes down or 19 minutes down. They've conceded 19 points in 90 minutes. You think the game is over. It's a formality. Finn chucks an intercept before halftime. You think Tom Ramos goes over and you thought, well, this game's gone, but it wasn't. And so, like, given the context and the sort of mayhem, I was sort of surprised by the lack of calmness from the French side and how they couldn't control the game for long periods. There may be like 15, 17 minutes of that game where they really fired and they overpowered Scotland and they looked really good. But for the rest, they looked kind of normal to average in bits, which has been the sort of worrying element of the first two games. Some of that was awful kicking. Their exits were desperate. And some of it fundamentally was great attack from Scotland. But generally, there was still a lot to love. The ambition to play, to adapt, to problem solve, given the context, was really enjoyable to watch. There was also a bit more space on the field because both sides were down to 14, so there was a bit more space to attack. And the ball was thrown everywhere. That was one thing, although it was more stop-start in that there were lineouts and scrums that we maybe didn't have in the Irish game. There was still a lot of play, of passing, of multi-phase and stuff to enjoy. I loved watching Finn Russell come back into the game as well after, we would say, an average first half for him and that intercept, which people will pick up on. But for all young players out there watching, a guy that stuck to his task, kept trying, kept pushing the ball to space, kept creating space for Hugh Jones, who in the end could have been man of the match. It was Gail Ficou that got the award at the end. But that was it. It was really enjoyable to watch. A strange context, so really dramatic, but an enthralling game for different reasons, shall we say.
And on the French red card, is that Mohamed Haouas' France career over, do you think, or not?
Oof. So he's the first, this is quite a strange stat. He's the first Frenchman to get 2 red cards, which I was like, there must have been a Frenchman before him to picked up 2. But bless him, he's the first one to pick up that bill. Is it the end of his career? I don't know. In that tight head isn't exactly, there's not people pegged on and nailed on. We've seen Dorian Aldegheri. He'll probably come back in next week, in that Mohamed Haouas was brought in ahead of Falatea because he can start and play 80 minutes and he's a sort of assured thing international level. I don't know is the honest answer, and that he's now obviously ripping up his contract. He's moving to Clermont to rebuild his club career. The first red that he picked up with Jamie Ritchie, he was provoked and he's clocked somebody in the face. This one is almost more clumsy. There was not even any provocation. It was just total clumsiness. So I'm not sure if he'll be forgiven. Will he be earmarked as a liability in that you've done this now twice? This could cost us a World Cup. Therefore, we can't have you in. I don't know. But in order for him to get back involved in the squad, it won't be as cheaply, certainly, as it was this time. He'll have to be better. He'll have to be consistent. He'll have to perform towards the end of this season. Because he doesn't have much game time now. Like, he's going to be banned 4 games, and then he's got the end of a season with Montpellier where he isn't figuring. So it's a big old test for him, put it that way.
And we'll chat more about the tournament as a whole, look ahead to the France-England game next week, obviously. But a massive blow for Anthony Jelonch. Reportedly has a fight on his hands to be fit for the World Cup, even with his knee ligament injury. Horrible for him personally, and obviously a lot of sadness around. But in terms of the France back row, what does it mean for that unit, do you think?
Let's talk about the why first. So, like, the bit that really still gets me is, I thought the French doctor did an amazing job. He essentially came in and stopped the game to ensure Anthony could get the HIA process, but I'm not sure if we almost need to go further. Like, as somebody that's been concussed on a rugby field, when you're the individual, you're trying everything you can to get back on the field, to pass your tests, to play well, to ensure that your legacy is good, to ensure that your club or your country wins the game, and to play your part. That is what you want to do, right? But I don't think that injury happens to Anthony if he isn't concussed, if he isn't right. So he's gone off the field. And what I would like to see is, even if he's passed the HIA requirements, is that you just remove him from it. You just remove that element of chance. But people might disagree with me, but, and again, it's purely anecdotal from my experience, but after a head knock, which you can still pass an HIA, you can be foggy, you're not right. It's almost like things aren't connected. Your head and your mind aren't connected to different parts of your body. And physically, you're not quite 100% yourself. So whether that's in timing, in confidence, like the combination and the culmination of what we've seen is him again sticking his body on the line, because that's the bloke he is. That's the boy he is. He's phenomenal to watch. But when you run into a 110 kg winger at 100 miles an hour and try and dominate a collision, and you're not quite yourself, you hurt yourself. And that's the disappointing bit, is that I don't think that type of injury happens if your timing's right and you're on it and your technique's proper. And there's no problem with his technique. So I think it's an issue with a head knock. And I'm gutted for him, because he's an absolutely lovely bloke. And I'm almost thinking, like, does the rule change need to be even further or severe, as it were, to protect him in that situation? Because the upshot is he now misses 6 months at a minimum and makes it really hard to make the World Cup. So desperately disappointed for him. He is an amazing boy, and he's been probably one of the best elements of the French side over the past 2 years. And the knock on, what does that mean for the French side? You've got Cameron Walkie coming back to fitness. You've got Cross, who's just come back in. There's strength and depth in that area, but probably the most consistent man in that unit alongside Greg Aldrit has been Anthony Jelonch. So disappointment for him, disappointment for France, hugely disappointing for Toulouse as well. And yeah, just really sad for him, because he's a mate and a great bloke, and hoping him a speedy recovery.
Yeah, not many people have made that point about the HIA process. And obviously, there's a lot of talk about it generally at the moment. So, at the very least, they could look at that incident as a part of the whole sort of process in terms of what they are going to do moving forwards.
Well, mate, weirdly as well. So it was his dad came out in national press. His dad came out and said, "Look, I just don't understand." He obviously thinks, but like we're talking about a high performance context and elite level sport. He's like, "That's my boy. Like my boy's just wrecked his cruciate. He's about to lose his dream. You've also got a 6-2 split on the bench. Like Makalou didn't even get used, didn't get off the bench. But why not just remove the risk? I know you're aiming for a championship. I know you want to win the game. I get it. But if we're protecting our players, if there's an HIA, is there another layer to be added? In that if we've seen you pick up a concussion properly, or we see you've been knocked out or slightly concussed, we just remove you. And that's it. The pressure on the player's gone. It's the doctor and the medical team. And there's been people that push back on that as well, because we have seen independent doctors remove people because they've had a funny hit with a hip or like not concussed at all. But it doesn't matter. Like we're trying to protect our players, remove it from the game, the concussion level, and consequently the big dangerous cruciate injury we've seen at the weekend. So maybe it needs re-looked at.
Right, that's enough of us chatting about the game, Johnny. We'll chat more next week ahead of the England match. We should get our guest on. Should we bring him in?
Better late than never. He's kept us waiting all week. We should get him
in. Let's get him on. It should be a good one, this. We're about to have a chat with a man who's a season and a half into his journey in the top 14 now, already has a league title to his name after spending over a decade trying to win silverware in the Premiership. So I'm guessing he's going to be pretty happy with the start he's made to his career in France. His former Bath and England prop, now Montpellier man, Henry Thomas. Reigning top 14 champion, Henry Thomas, we should say, to give you your full title. How's life in France? Because from the outside, looks like it's gone pretty well.
Yeah, I think it's the first time I've ever been introduced like that, so thank you. It's nice to hear that.
It should be standard. You should make that standard.
It should be standard, you're right. Yeah, I mean, the way we've been going is probably, it's nice to have a little confidence boost. Yeah, I'm going right. I'm enjoying it in the south of France. I think the weather here is, a lot better than back home, so it makes those winter sessions a little bit less tough.
And have you had a chance to reflect yet? I know it's only a year and a half into the journey, but Premiership, clubless towards the end, Montpellier champion straight away. Like, tell us a little bit about the ride getting there in the first place and how enjoyable it's been the past couple of seasons.
Yeah, so I think I had a great time at Bath. It was a real mix with a lot of bad injuries, also kind of backed up injuries. So I come back in and almost be out straight away for a long period of time and over COVID, and I really wasn't sure what I was going to do next. And I knew I fancied a new challenge, but when you hadn't played a lot of rugby consistently over the years, there were people kind of understandably unsure. And then opportunity came up in Montpellier, which is always somewhere where I wanted to play. I came here in I think it was 2012 with Sale, and then 2015 with Bath, and just thought how amazing this place was. And just kind of grabbed the opportunity. And Olivier Azam, who was here then, is someone who I played against for my first couple of seasons when he was at Gloucester and I was at Sale. On the opposite ends of our careers. So I kind of knew him already, and he kind of understood English rugby better than a lot of guys out in France. And it was a bit of a kind of shot into the unknown, really. And I knew at that point already that Zach was going to be here. And to be honest, I was just excited to be somewhere new and be able to have a fresh start and fresh perspectives. And yeah, and it kind of started from there, really. I think they'd had a disappointing season the season before, but ended on a high with the Challenge Cup win. And it just kind of seemed set up for a brilliant year. It wasn't all, sunshine and roses throughout the season. There were some tough points, but there were some really experienced guys in the mix, like Guillaume Garrado and Fufu Quadrado. I definitely haven't pronounced his surname right.
Fufu.
I'm sorry, yeah. And yeah, I feel like the stars really aligned, and it was a fantastic year. It was a tough year, first year in the top 14 with, those 26 regular season games plus Europe and all different challenges of being a new league, playing against players who I knew nothing about, and yeah, each week was his own challenge. I loved it.
And Johnny mentioned that before you moved to Montpellier, maybe 4 or 5 games before the end of that season, you hadn't signed a deal, so you didn't know where you were going to be playing. Am I right in thinking you came quite close to joining La Rochelle as well? You could have been European champion.
There was slightly before then. There was a medical joker up for grabs at La Rochelle, and that kind of got into advanced talks. And then Bath ended up pulling the plug on it, saying, actually, no, we need you for the rest of the season. And to be fair, at that point, I was playing every week, which I understood. I didn't really, I felt uneasy leaving Bath after being there for 7 years, just there 1 week, gone the next. But I knew it would have been a great opportunity. So unfortunately, it didn't come to pass in the end. But yeah, at that stage of the season, I was, it's quite stressful. But I had a few decent offers from the Pro D2, but I decided that I really wasn't quite ready for that yet. And I sat down with my agent and just said, look, I'm happy to just ride this out. And if that means waiting a few months without a club and, training myself, then being a tight head prop, something will come up. And then about 3 days later, the opportunity came up in Montpellier. So
I love it as well, backing yourself. It's very different when you're a useless number 8 and nobody wants you. You can say you can back yourself when you're a decent tight head. Something's always going to come up.
That's one of the only beauties of being a tight head, right? No one wants to do it.
But everyone wants to pick up that paycheck. You're right. You've done really well. And mate, the life and career of a professional sportsman is a fragile one. It can be very different for very positions, as we just established. But do you have a different sense of perspective now after taking that gamble, waiting, and getting the payoff, getting the move to a beautiful part of the world, playing top-level rugby, and now being a top 14 champion? Like, it's incredible.
I mean, yeah, it's a bit of a dream from where I was, almost clubless, to winning the top 14. I remember on the all those days after the final, they kind of blend in, as you can imagine. There's a bit of a blur. But I think it was on the Saturday after the final. On the Friday, we were back at the stadium. They'd erected a big stage next to the stadium, and I just had to take myself away for a little period and just have a reflect on, how happy I was, winning that first kind of real major trophy, especially at kind of club level, and how not many really guys get the opportunity to do that. And it was a bit of a roller coaster time.
I can imagine that spot as well. The hangover, the fear, the emotion catching up, having to go away for a little cry after becoming a top 14 champion. I love it. A man that I wanted to pick you up on as well. In that vein, and we saw the celebrations, we saw Fufu, we saw Enzo Forletta. Can you just talk us through the days that unfolded? Like, we spoke to Zach Mercer at the end of last season, but I still look back now at some of the stuff floating around social media. Your loose head prop, a man you probably know very well, Enzo Forletta, his celebrations. Like, what did it all look like? Because it looked sensational, but very tiring.
Well, Zach snuck off pretty quickly after the final and missed the celebrations for his golf stag do in Marbella. So I actually think he was. I mean, obviously he had a brilliant time. I'm sure he was a bit gutted to miss out because it's not really a scene, but it was absolutely carnage. It was non-stop, and Enzo is a bit of a cult leader of the troisième mi-temps, as they call it. And funnily enough, we were playing away in Stade Francais the weekend, and some of the Stade Francais supporters chanting his name, trying to get him to down a beer when we're warming up behind the post. It was how to explain it. It was just non-stop, relentless. I probably didn't understand the importance and the significance that the Brennus it really is in France, and how special it is, and how trashed it gets in the 4 days of celebrating afterwards. And I see myself as a fairly good drinker, but some of the French lads, they had that longevity. After day 3, I think I crashed out about 2 a.m. I had to go back. It was my missus' birthday the next day. I had to go wrap some presents or something before we got on it again the next day. But those guys went all night again, and he was the leader of that band. And also, because we didn't know if we were going to win, when we were going to finish, so they said, look, whatever happens, the Tuesday is our last day kind of together. We've got a big function with all the families on Tuesday. After that, you guys go, and if foreigners, you guys can book your flights, and that's when your time off will start. And after we won on the Monday, everyone got the message through being like, look, the president's going to pay for everyone to go to Barcelona for 3 days, all expenses paid, which was absolutely gutting. So at 25, all the French guys, a load of the staff all went there, 5-star hotel, had a all expenses paid trip to Barcelona on top of the week of celebration just gone. But we'd already booked flights to, I think we had to fly back for Zach's wedding, actually. But
Blame Zach.
Enzo is, I mean, I think because he wasn't playing, because he was injured, he played so much that season. But I felt he was a bit gutted. He was known better for his performance in the third half than he was for his performance on the pitch.
You mentioned the Brennus. There's loads of chat about what happens with the Brennus during the celebrations. What was the most interesting thing that you guys did with it?
Because I don't know the history of how it works really. I know in the past there's been someone was surfing with it the year before. I think it was definitely being used as a bodyboard through the changing rooms of the Stade de France. Everyone's wearing snorkel glasses, and it was in the hot tub, and then it was carried with us everywhere we went. I think after on the Sunday we had a beach party booked up, and through Saturday night the French guys kept drinking all night, and then ended up walking to this beach club. You guys kind of know Montpellier, so from the stadium to the beach club is by foot is a decent way, and I think they kind of bar crawled themselves to the beach club. Got there about 6 a.m, and they all fell asleep on the sand with the Brennus around them. And the streets of Paris on the Friday night, the nightclub shut about 6:30 a.m. There was a morning traffic, and cars, lorries, buses weren't going anywhere because everyone's jumping up and down on the Brennus in the middle of the road. Fans, players, coaches, it was that is a time I'll never forget. I could keep reminiscing about it, but it was brilliant.
And Johnny mentioned perspective. To add a little bit more perspective to your journey, I don't know how much you want to go into it, but I think it's fair to say your time at Bath, you didn't want to leave them in the lurch, but it didn't end kind of perfectly. And then as well, when you arrived in Montpellier, didn't you tear your hamstring pretty much on the first day of training? So to go from there to winning the top 14.
Yeah. I didn't make the greatest first impression for sure. I think that my last season at Bath, I really, not going into too much detail, they cut my contract and put me on more of a pay to play basis because of a couple of years I'd had, and I'd played 20 games that season, but I really battled through my body, and I arrived. I felt okay, and I think I did a 15-hour drive down from Bath down to Montpellier with my dad, and next day I was in training, but I was isolated training because of the whole COVID protocols and stuff. And it was me and Paul Wilhelmsey, because he'd just come back from Namibia, and I was very keen the first day. Body felt good, and I think I just overdid it a little bit. I had a little pop in my hamstring, but it wasn't. I'm not sure you know this feeling. as a tight forward, I'm not used to any sort of soft tissue injuries. So I was a bit like, maybe, I haven't done that much training in the last few weeks. I've run a bit, but it's probably just a bit of, bit of DOMS. I get over this, and did the rest of the training of the week and thought it hurts a bit, but I can't turn up to a club and get injured on the first day. I rejoined the squad on the Monday. We did a Bronco test. I did that and battled my way through that. And, I'm for a tight end, I'm quite a fit guy. So I did okay, and I was kind of happy with it. We started team training. I did one step sideways, and it completely popped. And yeah, and I'm not sure I'd fully signed. I'd agreed terms, but I'm not sure I'd fully signed the contract yet either. So I was absolutely.
You were like, deliver the contract now.
I was like, they're going to get rid of me, and I'm absolutely done. So I was in denial for a bit. The scans came through, and I ended up missing about 12 weeks.
Oof.
And Philippe was saying, you've arrived broken, and you haven't been truthful, and all this stuff. And I wasn't sure how long my journey in Montpellier was going to be at one point, but I got fit by about the fifth game of this season. And then kind of went on the journey from there, really.
You mentioned what Philippe was saying there. Regardless of all that, it must be really difficult when that happens just when you've arrived to kind of settle in, because you want to be kind of acclimatizing to the rugby, the way the team plays, but also your teammates, and all of a sudden you kind of feel very much on the outside.
Oh yeah, 100%. You feel on the outside. I was completing my master's. I was doing a master's in business. I was doing my dissertation for that, so my hours of socializing was at a minimum at that point, because I was kind of right at the crux of that. And a lot of the foreigners hadn't arrived yet either, because of international duty. So I didn't really know anyone apart from maybe the rehab S&C, and who spoke a little English. And Paul Elmsey was there, but he's a very busy man with his family. And so it was definitely a tough time. I'm not sure if you guys know it. There's a part city which is almost opposite the stadium, is where a lot of guys stay when they first arrived.
It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. It's like this big block of, there's nothing to walk to, nothing to do, but everyone gets put in there, and it's like you're kind of put in prison next to the stadium, and you're not sure what you can do. Can you leave? You don't know, but the food ain't great. You just want to get out, and it's not the most social. I know it very well. It was a horrible first couple of weeks for me as well, but
I ended up there for 8-9 weeks because the Montpellier was it's just a summer place. So all the French come on holiday there. There was nowhere available, and I was, by the end of the day, I wasn't being picky, but there was nowhere to be, and so I had to just kind of sit in this box room. Luckily, I had AC. And it was definitely a tough time. I didn't really know the guys very well. You get to know the guys well by, if you don't speak the same language, then you're working hard together. You're blowing out your hoop, and you're working with the guy next to you, and that kind of gives you that bond, that initial bond. But I didn't have any of that stuff. So yeah, you're right. It was a tough start.
And you mentioned Philippe as well. The initial conversation, you've come here broken, obviously laying on thick and a bit of pressure, but general terms, what's he like as a bloke, as a director of rugby? Because he did turn things around. I mean, Montpellier, the level of investment, even when I was there, was absolutely massive. But to win that first championship with what seemed like a fairly straightforward game plan was phenomenal. But Philippe, behind the scenes, what's he like?
It's a difficult question. I think he's very much a kind of satellite DOL, if you know what I mean. Like he's an off the pitch. I think he's setting structures for the club. He's doing recruitment. He'll run meetings. He'll cast an eye out at training. He'll leave a lot of that kind of stuff to the coaches. But he kind of brings everything together with his meetings. I think he's obviously a hugely popular man in France. He's a French legend. I think he realised that every away game you go, he's stopped by more, for more photos than the players are. And he actually just left Sale when I arrived, back in 2009, 2010. So I heard a lot of stories from him from around that time as well. But I think it's fair to say he turned the club around, and I think someone told me it was the first time, a bunch of coaches had re-signed at Montpellier since they got promoted. That's been the turnover and the expectation at the club. So I think he's done a brilliant job.
Yeah, he's sort of I suppose in England it would be a kind of a Dean Richards type figure that right at the top, and then he empowers his coaches to work on the training field, I guess. One of those coaches that I was going to ask you about, you're being coached by Alexandra Ruiz. What's it like being coached by a ref?
Be honest.
Yeah, I think last year especially, he came in and brought a new perspective for especially in France about how to deal with the referees, and he had that relationship with referees, which really benefited us to make us seem like we were listening to them and we were reacting to what they wanted rather than it was us against the referees, which I think worked so well that obviously it got copied around. There's a few other clubs that have done the same thing now, and so maybe it doesn't work quite as well. But I think this year he's taken on a bit more of a coaching role. I think it's a difficult transition from being a referee into a coach. So I think he's definitely learning. He's definitely learning all the time.
And in terms of other guys that are part of the backroom staff, Olivier Azam has left. He's no longer there. Bruce Rehanna taking care of the 3-quarter line. And Richard Cockrell looks like he's coming in as well this summer. I sent him a WhatsApp to congratulate him. Didn't come back to me, so he's rude. But what's the general...
Quick to forget.
Yeah, I don't bear a grudge. I won't be coming on the podcast. But like those guys and the backroom staff, the sort of blend that they have and the personalities, Bruce Rehanna, a huge reputation as well as a player from New Zealand, his time Northampton, Bordeaux as well. They loved him in Bordeaux. What's Bruce like as a coach?
I think his detail is very good. I think he definitely sticks with his role. He's the skills and he's kicking coach, and so he focuses on that. I think he leaves the kind of French politics to other people to deal with. He is unbelievably fit. You look at him now and you think he could probably still play the game.
He's ripped to the chiselers.
Absolutely ripped, and he still joins in non-23 training. I'm pretty sure if he gassed me a few times last year in training, this guy's just mid to late 40s, and he looks like he's late 30s. So he probably looks younger than me actually. But he's also a top bloke as well. It's good to have him there. He speaks good French from his days at Bordeaux, and he's a regular on the golf course with a few of us as well. Talented golfer as well. It's good to have him. And
on your teammates, we were chatting about it earlier on. Obviously, one of your teammates very much in the headlines last weekend, Mohamed Haouas. Another red card against Scotland. What's he like kind of off the pitch? Because there's a lot of chat about the fact that he's got those 2 red cards. Johnny mentioned earlier, the only Frenchman ever to be sent off twice. The only player ever in the Six Nations, I think, to get 2 red cards. And there is a lot of chat about him. I asked Johnny earlier on whether his France career might be over, a typical kind of sensationalist journalism thing to ask. But it's interesting behind the scenes, like what he's kind of like. Is he a hothead or is he really kind of quite chilled out off the field? What's he like?
He's an interesting character. I think he's had from what I've heard, he's had quite a tough upbringing around Montpellier, and a lot of his issues have been in the press, and some have been resolved, some are ongoing, and I think the club have helped him a lot. They understand that they almost have a responsibility to keep him on track, because when he is on track, he is a sublime athlete. He's unbelievably talented. I think if he really screws his head on right, there's absolutely no way why he shouldn't play for France again. But I think his move to Clermont it's probably wise for him to get out of Montpellier and probably have to face some different challenges away from familiar areas and some past problems.
Mate, another man to ask you about, same position as well. All Black Carl Tuanakwafe. Is he making his way back from injury? Because we've been waiting on the impact, colossal player, started his career in Narbonne as well, I believe, and now worked his way back to Montpellier. Will we be likely to see him in a Montpellier shirt before the end of the season? And how's his road back going?
Yeah, I mean, Big Carl's turned up, and he is an absolute mountain of a man, and absolutely brilliant character as well. And one of those guys who's just kind of infectious, unbelievably laid back. I think that when he turned up at the club, they knew he had a bit of he was recovering from his knee injury, and he just never really seemed to get right. And I don't think he really knew the answers either, and he was struggling. But they were keen just to kind of keep him training and hoping that he would get better. And more recent kind of scans and stuff showed that there was his original operation before he arrived wasn't as successful as they hoped, and there was still a few bits going on in there. So he went in a few weeks ago, and been catching up with him this week, and he's walking much better, and I think he'll be back towards the end of the season. And from scrummaging against him, he's a loose head. He's more of a loose head, but he can play tight head, which is pretty rare these days. He's a scary man to scrummage against. He's the colossal man, colossal friendly giant. When he can get moving again, he's got some silky skills as well. So, I'm sure he's hoping for before the end of the season, but he signed it for 3 years, so I think there's a big impact to come from him.
Silky skills, massive power, and the best tash in world rugby as well.
Oh, by far. We had that November. We had a little competition who could wear the best moustache, which was a bit of a fuss really in the end, because it was already two clear winners. Marco Tallane, I think, went with handlebars, and in his profile pic put on a cowboy hat and went up against me for early doors, and obviously I was immediately knocked out. And then Carl was obviously the eventual winner. It's a thing of beauty, really, isn't it?
It is. It's colossal. And you just mentioned two massive blokes as well. Marco Tallane, who's coming back and getting some game time as well. I wanted to ask just like a general sense. So coming from the Premiership, we talk about top 14, the physicality over here all the time. Can you give us a sense of the difference? Have you noticed it? Is there a big gap? What do you make of it?
Yeah, obviously this gets asked a lot by people, what's the difference between top 14 and Premiership? And yeah, I would say physicality is one of the biggest ones. I think it's probably like least affected by the front row, because you're used to playing against big blokes, and I've never been a huge tight head, so I've always had to deal with that kind of element of things. But it's just the consistent that every team is massive, and every team has got multiple game breakers. A lot of Fijians and Samoans and massive French guys who you have to look out for every week, and the breakdown is massively contested, which just kind of changes the game. Some games can be set piece orientated, some games can be kick fest, some games can be jouer. So that can be similar in both leagues, but the size of the packs, I think, is just, and actually the backs as well. You look around, we've got
everyone
against Racco this weekend. It's just like every team you play against, they've got a two-us over, and the moment we've got Dakawaka, who's kind of tearing up trees, and you just think, every time I see him play, I think, thank God he's on my team, because I would not want to tackle him.
And the best names are continuing to gravitate towards the top 14 for financial reasons mainly, but also a variety of other lifestyle reasons. A certain Stuart Lancaster is going to the top 14 to coach next season. And just touching a little bit on your international career, you obviously played under him quite a bit for England, and then didn't get a look in after the 2014 tour to New Zealand. So was there something that happened there?
No, I mean, I went on the New Zealand tour in 2014. which was, brilliant against the All Blacks. And, that was definitely a kind of a career goal of mine. And then I got back from that. I started at Bath, and I think I had one of my best seasons. I was a young player then as well. I was playing, and I felt like I was learning, and I didn't quite, this is probably a bit harsh on myself. I didn't feel like I quite deserved to be there yet. I wasn't the player I wanted to be yet, but I had kind of a pathway to it. And I had a few injuries in the next season. Was kind of getting back into training squads, and I had an operation on my shoulder, and I got back about 4 games left of the season when Bath got to the final in 2015. And I just missed out on the World Cup squad because I hadn't played enough since coming back from injury. And then again, once that finished, Eddie Jones came in and brought into the squad, and I was really happy the way I was playing at the time. And as you know, Eddie's quite an intimidating character.
Is he?
He came in, obviously no one really knew much about him, especially from England standpoint, back when he first came in. We had a full day of meetings, and we had to, sign all the jerseys and do all your kit fittings and a bit of gym. And he was like, right, I want everyone to come in and, speak to me one-on-one. I'll let you know where you're at. Let's have a conversation. And I was like, sweet, kind of built myself up for this first meeting. I went in quite early, maybe third in there, maybe too keen, I don't know. And he said, look, I see you at the moment, second choice. And I was thinking, that sounds pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. And he was like, well, want you to work on this, this, and this. I've got a few questions for you. And he asked me a question like, what would your opposition loose header you're playing against, how would he describe you in 3 words? And I was honestly, absolutely not me. And I was thinking, do I big myself up here? Do I play it cool? Do I, try and act like a hard man? I actually can't remember what I said in the end, but it was obviously wrong because next day, before we'd had a session, they sent a load of guys back to the club, and I got sent back to my club, and didn't get a look in for another kind of 9 months or so. And then that's the period where I was injury, come back, get into a squad, injury, and I can't push any of that on him. That was I couldn't stay fit for long enough. But it was the shame for me really was that when I played for England, I definitely wasn't at my best, if you know what I mean. I was growing as a player there, hoping to have a long international career, and I never quite got over that last hurdle.
He clearly liked you, though, apart from the answer to that question, which must have been horrendous if you didn't get looking after that. But he clearly liked you. So
I think it was more like, intimidating. I don't know. It was, the question really wasn't what I was expecting from a new head coach, if I'm honest. But no, I had a few other interesting interactions with him. He once called me when I was injured. I think I was on holiday in Portugal in off season. I think I just had another shoulder operation, and he said, look, I'm really sorry. I think you've been playing really well. Been playing really well, but we're not going to take you on this squad. And I was, on the summer tour, I was thinking, yeah, I've been injured for the last 3 months. And he kind of quickly handed the phone up and was like, yeah, I know, yeah, but you're playing well before. All the best, mate. And, put the phone down. A few kind of weird interactions like that, but you're never quite sure whether I think he's testing people more than you think, I don't know. His mind games, I think, are probably second to none.
I think he talks himself in riddles, and I think he thinks he's smarter than he actually is. He pisses me off watching him. I want you to try and get back to that room and try and think what the 3 words you came up with were. So go from second choice to get papped out the door the next day. It must have been absolutely shocking. So try, if you can, what were they? And there's a note for all young players out there: don't use these 3 words that Henry used, because don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. Amazing.
Honestly, I skipped out of that room thinking, spot on, second choice. I think Dan Cole was first choice. You know, he'd been there for a long time. Very good, experienced player. I thought, yeah, this is, you know, I can build from here. And I was gone. I was absolutely gone.
Johnny,
Incredible.
what would your opposition number 8? What would you describe yourself as? Oh no, that was the question, was it, Johnny? Eddie's confused me. I'm gone.
What would my opposition man describe me as whilst playing against me?
Yes.
A little light. Probably would be probably lightweight for that position.
Maybe that's what Eddie wanted. Small, soft. You know, maybe that's what he wanted. Who knows?
Or maybe he wanted, I don't care. You know, I actually thought about this. I've thought about this meeting a lot in many years since it's happened.
Bet you have. I bet you have, mate. Demons.
Should I just said, look, I don't care what he says. You know, maybe I should have said that, but you know, I said the wrong thing, obviously. So he probably thought I was a little too posh and got me out of there.
But stick yourself on the other side. Why would you want to make a player think that he could fuck up something with 3 words? It's so simplistic and stupid. That's what annoys me. And that he's going to make a snap judgment, putting some under pressure, come out with 3 words, and you could either pick them or not. Like, no, pick them if they're a good rugby player or not. That's as simple as it is. And so, mate, right, weirdly, on that note, you're only 31. It's been 9 years since your last cap. You've seen teammates like Zach Mercer. He'll be heading back across the channel this summer, back to the Prem. Is it something you think about, in that ship had sailed with Eddie? He's now gone. There's a new coach come in. Has there been any contact? But the international dream, is it still there for you and something you want to pursue? Because you're still a young prop.
I think, you know, I'm not going to sit on here and announce my international retirement as
neither am I.
Not involved for a long time.
I'm still available, but just...
but I'm not going to make my decisions for it. You know, I'm interested to see what the next few years has in store. Someone like Matt Stevens obviously went out. I had a little hiatus and then went out to Toulon for a while and then went back to Saracens and then played a couple of years for England. And he was older than me. He was about my age, I think, around that time, maybe slightly older, and a different player than when he originally played for England. So, you know, it's not out of the question. I'm not something I'm expecting. Without being cliche, I'm just trying to play well. I'm trying to enjoy my rugby as well, without that kind of pressure. You know, use that pressure to get myself new contracts and also enjoying where I'm playing. I think English rugby is a bit of a mess at the moment. I think that's probably fair to say. There are a lot of problems in the clubs financially, and playing in France is a breath of fresh air. I love going to these away games. Honestly, I love going to these away games. We've got Perpignan in a few weeks. We've got home games weekend, which is always great. But these away games where you haven't been to, we've got Perpignan in a few weeks, which I missed last year. It's one of the most hostile places in the top 14. Toulouse about a month ago. You come in, DJ, probably 6,000-7,000 people around the bus when you arrive. Those experiences are just so unique to France and how much they absolutely love the game of rugby in France.
And they're all there for Philippe Saint-André for a selfie.
And on that, obviously, you mentioned there you're in your second year. You're not going to make decisions based on any possibility of playing for England again. So therefore, that opens a whole world for you. I don't know if you've sorted where you're playing next season, if you're staying at Montpellier, if you're going somewhere else. But do we need to put the bat signal out for clubs to come and get you, or?
I'll put the bat signals out. No, it's all undecided at the moment. So again, like I kind of mentioned earlier to you, was, you know, that there are a lot of foreigners at Montpellier, and so this year especially, I've not played as much as I wanted. Last year I played 26 games last season, which was great with a bit more rotation and stuff. And this year it's been a bit more tricky. Obviously, still a decent amount of the season left. So I'm just trying to stay fit, play as much as I can, and like you said, I'm 31 and I'm still, I'm happy the way I'm playing. I'm a bit older, probably a bit slower, and but that experience up front, counts for a lot, I think. And I've got plenty more years. Well, I say plenty more years. I got a couple more years left in me.
5 or 6.
It worked out pretty well the last time you did this and backed yourself. You got yourself a decent club, so keep going.
My old teammate Vadim Kobalas is 40 this year, and he's still cracking on Bordeaux. So he gives me hope.
Like a fine wine, old Vadim. He's doing really well, mate. A few guys that are arriving as well. Cowan Dickey, Simmons, rumored to be Harry Williams as well. How do you reckon they're going to settle in? How do you think they're going to enjoy the top 14?
I think all three of them are actually quality players, so I think they'll settle in fine. It's probably being the three of them might make it a little easier to start with. They're big on us being a team at Montpellier and trying to integrate, so they'll have to try and do that a little bit. I'm not sure how much French they know between them, but I know all three of them well. They're all top blokes. So. No, I think they'll go. I think they'll go well. If I'm honest, Montpellier can be a bit up and down. With last year, obviously, it was brilliant. This year, we've been under a bit of pressure, so it'll be interesting to see how they find the transition, because it's a lot more than rugby. As I'm sure you know, Johnny, it's a lot more than just rugby. It's your lifestyle out here. So if you can enjoy that and really embed yourself in the culture, and you can enjoy how hard things are, how hard it is to go to the bank and that kind of stuff, that if you can take that in your stride, then you have absolutely no problems here. Some guys struggle because everyday stuff can be that much tougher until you either learn that in the south of France they do things very slowly, or you learn French.
And speaking, maybe not in the same breath, we spoke earlier on about you acclimatizing to life in France when you moved over there. Obviously tricky with the injury. I've read somewhere you might have stayed with Paul Willemse for a while. We obviously know you spent a bit of time in Johnny's dodgy student accommodation that he knows very well. But yeah, your time kind of getting used to life in France.
Yeah, well, I think they were just, things seemed backwards when I arrived. Just the way things are done they weren't worse, but they weren't better. They were just very different, culturally. So I was injured, but we had these team building things on Saturdays during pre-season, so there's no flying back to England to see friends or whatever. It was like, doing team things. There's one day we got given this location. It was about an hour away, so we kind of lift shared out to this place, and it was a bull farm, a bull ranch, essentially, and it's big like Alex Ruiz. So we got to this place, and we thought, surely we're not in the right place here. They load us up on a tractor trailer and just tractor through into this field, and we watched about eight blokes and horses round up these bulls for about 20 minutes. Alex Ruiz pops off, jumps on one of the horses, kind of does the same thing. Then we roll back into this shed. It's about 10:30 in the morning. They hand us all a warm beer, a warm Peroni. And they were like, cheers, lads, have a good weekend. And then we all left. It was
the randomness. I love it.
No, everyone was, what else? There was, we went to Corsica on a pre-season trip. Have you ever been to Corsica?
How good, mate. That is my dream holiday. Not for a rugby tour, but family, beaches, beautiful.
Yeah, I've been there twice now. Everyone said this to me, and I'm not sure I've seen that side of things. We so we're there on pre-season camp. We're staying in this family resort place, and it's pre-season trips away. You're pretty lucky to get away on one of those pre-season trips. And we've had a brutal Monday, Tuesday, like you do in pre-season. It's about 35 degrees. Actually, to be honest with you, I was doing recovery on the beach because I was injured. But the lads were working really hard. And it came to the Wednesday, the day off, and they're like, we've got this little walk planned. Going to this waterfall, and it's going to be lovely. And, whatever. This is on a Tuesday. And Tuesday night, we went to a meal out, and everyone got pretty pissed. Saturday morning, rocked up, early start, 8:30, with about an hour and a quarter drive in the bus. And we had an all-day hike up a mountain. Boys are absolutely hanging on. I think Olivier Zam was about to collapse. And bear in mind, this walk was incredible. It was mountains, these views, the waterfalls we've seen, but boys are off the back of 2 days tough training, a night on the piss. Well, I think we lost 3 or 4 of the lads on the way because they fell behind and kind of fell into a bush. There was a big steep slope. A few of the boys fell down the slope. We got back about 4 o'clock, and I think about a third of the lads missed training the next day. They were absolutely smashed. Like, it was, rugby players love to complain, but let me tell you, this was a tough walk, and they acted like it was just a day off recovery walk.
Cultural differences, Johnny.
Cultural differences, mate. I love it.
Few interesting times, let me tell you.
Mate, it reminds me of like Fabien Galtier took us up in Tignes, so took us up to the mountains. But we did like a 3-hour hike to the top of one of the hills. But like at that time, some of our players like 145, 150 kilos. Do you know what I mean? You're taking boys from Wallis Islands, New Caledonia, some of the biggest islanders in the world, playing pro rugby, up a 3-hour hike, and we broke them. Like, looking back now, it's madness. But then that is part of the wonder of French rugby, the culture change, the shift, the different views on things. I loved it. Great times.
I loved it as well. I couldn't walk the next day because I was actually injured, and I did the whole thing. They told me it was going to be easy. But you're right. I think a big thing is that they don't like people complaining. So as a foreigner, a new guy, you go there and you just kind of do it and embrace the weirdness, embrace the difference. And I think if you do that, they kind of accept you. And the guys that don't accept are the ones that kind of try and make it like England or like Wales, wherever you're from.
And you've had a fairly phenomenal career and played for some tremendous clubs. You must have come across in that time some tasty characters as well.
Yeah, I think I've been pretty lucky. I think with the characters that I play with, I play with Andy Powell. Andy Powell moved to Sale in 2012. I think he moved to Sale, and I was a young guy at the time, so the only thing really I knew of him was, crazy blonde hair, big number 8, drives golf buggies on the M4.
Yeah.
Those kind of stories. That's all I heard of him. So he turned up, and I had no idea what to expect, and he didn't disappoint. I mean, the first week he came in, he was pretty quiet, and people say, Steve Diamond's going to look after him, and they've kind of calmed him down. And so a few weeks went by, he played, he's pretty quiet, played kind of well, and I thought, this guy's got his head down now. And we went on a away trip. I think it was to Brive. Horrible place to go. Amlin Cup back then. I think we lost by 3 points or something. It was about -5 in the middle of winter. And anyway, European trip back then as well. You always stayed overnight after. So lads are on a complete tear up. It's a big court session. We went a night out. I'm pretty sure a few lads got pepper sprayed on night out. Back to the hotel. No one was allowed any clubs because everyone stunk of pepper spray. Back to the hotel. There was absolute carnage going on at the hotel. Me and my roommate walked past the service room, and there's Andy Powell trying to push one of those, those big metal grates full of laundry, maybe about 2 meters tall on wheels. He was trying to pushed this thing off a fourth floor balcony onto like a mezzanine before blow. Yeah, he was absolutely clean off. I think he got stopped. I think someone pulled him away before it kind of fell through reception. Another guy who's a top character is Danny Cipriani. I mean, I'm sure you've heard lots about him and his life, and his life never stays too far away from, Daily Mail, for good and bad. But there was a certain occasion on the Otley Run, famous pub crawl for people who don't know about it. Again, he'd come back from the Rebels that year, got in quite a lot of trouble in Melbourne, got in trouble kind of with Wasps before, and he came over to, turn over a new leaf. We had the season, and he didn't really hang out with the team that much. He was, a lovely guy at the club, quite quiet, very opinionated with his rugby, but he made his own friends in Manchester, and a bit disappointing because we were quite a tight knit group, but it was fine. But we went on end of year social. He didn't drink beer, so Otley Run is 24 pubs, and someone drinking Jack Daniels and Coke. He saw an early decline, and he was on brilliant form, one of the best form I'd ever seen him in that whole year. And he just started turning a corner. We were right down the bottom of the Otley Run by the university, and three of us walking along. He ran behind us. We whacked one of the boys right around the top of the head, sprinted past, did a kind of a U-turn and kind of into the road facing us, and then whack.
Yes.
Bus. Hit by a bus.
Did hear that story.
And I urge you to Google Danny Cipriani gets hit by a bus, because we were all there in fancy dress. There was kind of different groups. I was part of a group of Oompa Loompas. There was the kind of Wizard of Oz group. There was Where's Wally, and so there was somehow there was media there straight away. I had to call the ambulance. Our ambulance was there in seconds. He was breathing. He was fine. The bus is completely smashed up, and there's a picture of him, being put on a kind of spinal board or whatever it was, and then there's two Oompa Loompas, the Where's Wally and the Wizard of Oz, all stood around him. And then I had to make that dreaded phone call to Steve Diamond. I was, you can imagine what he's like. Before I got in the press, I was thinking, I rang him. I was like, "Look, Dimes, we've messed up." And he was like, "What the fuck have you done?" One of the boys has been hit by a bus. Oh, fuck yeah! He lost his mind. Yeah, and
not just one of the boys. The
golden
boy.
I had to kind of eke it in that it was the guy who was going to get the most media attention around it as well. And so I kind of held the phone about this far away from my head, and kind of took the crap and said, "Look, he's fine. He's in the hospital. A few lads gone with him," and we all kind of scuttle off to the nearest pub, and everyone's a bit down, and everyone was like, "Right, we just have to crack on, really, because he's fine, and we just got we got to have a good time." And then we were there with Sammy Tutupo and Johnny Eliota. So Sammy's Tongan, Johnny's Samoan, and
they'd have done some damage to the bus as well if it hit them.
Well, those guys are best friends, and we were about 20 yards away from where it happened. Everything kind of cleared off at this point, and some stupid academy kid asked one of them, "What's better, Tonga or Samoa?" And you can imagine how it goes. And it started off, and obviously it's Tonga, obviously it's Samoa. Until about 5 minutes later, they were kind of wrestling and knocking bells into each other on the same road. Like Sips got hit by a bus. Academy guy jumps in to try and split him up, catches one on the jaw, gets double jaw fracture.
Oh man!
And yeah, that was basically one of the last times we were allowed out into Leeds for end of year social. I think things had to quiet down for a year after that.
So good.
Well, the last people always ask me, because I play with Gavin Henson at Bath, and people ask me, Gav's pretty crazy, and it was the year after Carl Ferns had punched him in the pub, and that was all over the news. And he genuinely lovely bloke. Just gets a bit wild on the sauce.
And now he's running a pub, isn't he, in Wales somewhere in the back of Beyond, I think. Gavin Henson.
Yeah, I mean, he's got some stories. I won't tell them for him. But he did sink a boat. He did sink a boat. The Own with Charlotte Church in the Cardiff Bay, which is an interesting one. But I won't tell that for him.
We'll have to get him on, Johnny.
Yeah.
We will. Toulon stories, Welsh stories. He's got them all. He's some boy.
And talking about your international career and the possibility of playing again, then Johnny mentioned Zach Mercer, who obviously is moving back to the Premiership and therefore will be able to be considered for the World Cup for England. There's a lot going on in Wales at the moment with them changing the rule about where players can and can't play and still be selected. More broadly, as a man who has now moved to the top 14 and enjoyed life over there and rugby over there, what do you make of the kind of rules? Because it's different for different countries. Do you think players should be able to play their club rugby wherever and still be selected, or do you think it's different depending on the country we're talking about?
I do think it's different depending on the country. I think I understand England's stance seems to make sense. There's 11 teams now in the Premiership, and they want to be able to keep the product of the Premiership as high as possible, and you do that by maintaining as many of your stars as you can. And you use international rugby as that key figure to keep people there. Where in Wales, again, them reducing the 60 cap rule, 25 cap rule makes more sense for them, because the more Welsh internationals you're holding in your team, the more you're spending on your cap, and the more pressure you're putting on the regions. It is a tough one. I think that if you move to France, generally you're going to be earning, and you're an international star player, you're going to be earning more money. So if you stay in England and you pay for England, you earn a lot of money playing for England as well. So it's almost offsets it anyway, financially anyway. So personally, I think they should keep it for the Premiership. I think other countries have got their own rules, and they make sense. But it's basically about keeping talent in their own league. So I know the Premiership will want to try and keep their product high. They got the new deals with the TV and that kind of stuff. And if they keep letting top players leave, then people aren't going to want to watch the Premiership as much.
Absolutely. Well, it's brilliant to see you going so well over there, and we will keep our eyes peeled for that next contract in the next few months, and maybe, who knows, see you in a white shirt again someday.
We'll see.
Cheers, Henry.
Cheers.
Bye.
Clever guy, Johnny, and good that he feels comfortable enough to back himself, because he clearly did that before he went to Montpellier, and now he's a top 14 winner, and he's doing it again. We're sat here in March now, and he hasn't signed a deal yet for next season, but he knows something will come up because he's a in-demand prop.
Well, that's it. And he's a tight head as well, and they're worth their weight in gold. So the fact that he's already done it, he's made that move over here, he's shown that he can play and operate at a really high level in the top 14. I'm sure he'll pick something up. Now that we've sent the back signal out as well, and all the coaches that are listening, easily going to pick up an extension with Big Philippe, or he'll pick something else up in the top 14. But just broadly, really interesting bloke, super smart, articulate. Really enjoyed him talking about his way in his England journey, not being the player that he wanted to be and feeling undercooked for it. It's a strange one as well, because these opportunities come up so seldomly. You're never going to be the complete package, so just go for it and say whatever Eddie Jones wants to hear in those 3 fucking words. Who cares? Poor guy, that must have haunted him. But generally, lovely bloke. He's playing really well in the top 14, the games that I've worked on as well. He's doing a great job. And yeah, just level-headed and a good guy to have on. So looking forward, and he'll be looking forward to going to Perpignan as well in 2 weekends' time. We'll be playing against Clermont this weekend. But yeah, just another really decent bloke doing a great job in the top 14. So great to have him on with us.
Right. We will touch very briefly on the top 14 shortly, but let's find out what gets your meter moment of the week first, Johnny.
Well, not that I agreed with them sacking Monsieur Urios, but they're turning a little corner. 6 tries at the weekend. They've just got themselves back into the top 6. Youngsters that are absolutely flying. They're playing some decent, attractive and fast rugby. So Bordeaux to meter moment of the weekend, 6 tries against Perpignan, which means Perpignan are still in 13th, but Bordeaux flying high back into the top 6 and potentially getting themselves a playoff spot. Well done to them. And they are this week's meter moment of the weekend.
Can't argue with that. That was Johnny's meter moment of the week, and Meter is the world's #1 wireless meat thermometer, recently making over 20 million cooks better with their game-changing app and completely wireless Bluetooth meat probe. You can use it on a barbecue, in the oven, or in a pan, and you can get your hands on one at meter.com. Plus, you can get 10% off any full price item. All you have to do is enter the code FrenchPod10 at checkout. That's FrenchPod10, and you get 10% off any full price item at meter.com. We spoke a bit about Jeremy Davidson taking over at Cast last week, and then it was confirmed after we recorded.
Mm-hmm.
But his tenure couldn't really have got off to a much worse start, could it, Johnny?
They got absolutely spanked. Bayonne, I think, is now 10 from 10 at home. They just announced they've got another sellout. They're taking one game against Pau down to San Sebastian for 36,000 tickets sold down there as well. They are absolutely flying, but Cast just a little bit lost. And I'm not sure what they're looking for, if it's a knee-jerk reaction, emotional charge, or whatever it is they're needing, but it didn't happen. They got 2 yellow cards in quick succession at the same time against Bayonne. They shipped 5 tries. They didn't look like they were doing much in attack, so it's a little bit desperate. But that's it. Jeremy Davidson, that was week 1. What can you really do in week 1? Nothing. He's got a few rounds left to try and make sure they avoid relegation and the drop zone properly in the mix with 2-3 teams there, and try and boost their efforts to get back in the top 6. So it starts now. You'll be looking at improved performance from them this weekend. And President Pierre-Louis Revol, he spoke this week about just the need and why it was done to sort of, I guess, validate what's already been done. But yeah, big job at Cast. A lot of mates still there, still coaching, and it's not looking good. So he was hoping they can turn it around.
Yeah, we did speak about how they overachieved, I guess, last season, and how they often do very well despite the fact that they don't have the biggest budget in the league, but they've gone down to 11th now from the top 14 final. So is it, I guess it's hard to pinpoint exactly what's gone wrong, but what can they do to bounce back? Is it just more of fostering that spirit that we've spoken about before when you talk about Cast?
Well, the spirit, but then it's also just doing the simple things well, keeping 15 people on the field. I mean, you watch France Scotland at the weekend. It's a very simple thing to say. The nuts and bolts of what they do, finding a game plan, but it's almost as well in this competition. It's quite psychological, and when things don't go well, they compound, and then errors, discipline, and the fundamentals of your game all go, and the emotion comes in, and you start shooting yourself in the foot. So stopping that is the sort of change that's hoped from a new coach or a freshman, and an emotional recharge. But then just getting back to your basics, things that you've done well. They're not going to go and change their game plan entirely in 2-3 weeks. But just a little bit of confidence coming back in. 2 wins and quickly you're away from that relegation zone. So back-to-back wins, back to basics, and keeping your head. That's the strange thing of this competition. When it goes bad, it can go very bad and very quickly. I've been there with Cast. We avoided relegation, and here's hoping that's what they can do in the next 2-3 weekends.
And speaking of hammerings, Racing got thrashed away at Lyon as well. And it's interesting because we've seen very early, it was announced that Gonzalo Quesada is leaving Stade Francais at the end of this season, and they've kind of rallied around him and going really well. With Racing, obviously, we know there's a change at the top with Stuart Lancaster coming in next season. Obviously, we know Finn's off as well. They seem to be they're up and down a lot, but they seem to be treading water a bit at the moment. Is that fair? Or do you think when Finn comes back, we might see a bit of a bounce back and them kind of do something towards the end of the season?
Well, Finn's definitely their talisman. So it's difficult when you lose your absolute rock star and your star player. He's the guy that drives everything, drives their systems. He's the guy that creates the X factor as well. So you're missing a big, big player. It's almost as if that loss with other clubs is felt less because they've got maybe replacements that are of a higher quality. You got to remember Racing as well. If you look through their team, they're going through a bit of a transitional phase. a bit of a reshape. So it's a big job for Stu Lancaster, for Lanny coming in next season as well. Freddie Michalak has been announced. He's coming up from Toulon. He's joining the staff as well, but that's all next season. What can they do this year, having been Champions Cup finalist, top 14 finalist, often recently, to now a sort of mid-table looking team? How can they finish? They need to finish strong. And you got to remember as well, it's not like their staff is changing, but people are moving upstairs. It's not like they're moving out or leaving the business. They're being retained. So it's very different for Racing, but you're right, they don't quite look settled. And Finn being away and being exceptional with the Scottish side doesn't help. They were looking forward to him having him back and finishing their season strongly.
And on that coaching changes point, there's another interesting one, isn't there? Rumours that John O'Gibbs, having left the top job at Clermont, may be forwards coach at Toulon.
And look, he's a guy that, if you think back to previous podcast records with Benji Kaiser and the love that Benji had for him at Clermont as a forwards coach, I know all of the guys loved him at Ulster as well, and it didn't quite click for him at Clermont as head coach, but I still believe that's because it's the transitional phase that all these clubs are in. It's GIF, it's young people coming through, it's formation, but he's still got a very, very good CV. He's still widely respected as a coach. And that's in France with the blokes that can actually coach and speak the language that aren't that many. So Toulon, another club that doesn't look settled either. They're looking for solid foundations and a solid forwards coach, and he certainly would fit the bill. An outstanding coach who's looking to sort of rebound and get another job, and that could be a good coup for Toulon.
And any whispers about player movement that you've heard as well?
There's a few in French media, mate. Ian Henderson from Ulster to Toulouse. Apparently his profile they really enjoy. He's a guy that's been flying high for Ulster and for Ireland for a number of years, the British and Irish lines as well. You know what you're getting with Ian Henderson: line out quality, gain line, physicality. He's phenomenal. And then almost Reinhard Elstad in the opposite direction. So he's at the end of his contract with Toulouse, and Ulster looking for a second row, back row hybrid. He's more of a back rower, but could fit the bill. The other one that came up in press this week, who a guy's been on the podcast, a friend of the show, Haouas West. He's only a year into his 3 years with Toulon, but apparently Ronan O'Gara would like to get him back to be the sort of complementary 10 and split game time with Antoine Hastoy. So potentially Haouas moving back to La Rochelle, where he's a European Cup winner and did a phenomenal job. So a weird one in that it's after year one of a 3-year contract, but look, it's a place that he knows, was part of the furniture, led things there and was outstanding. So that could be another positive move for him as well and his family.
Thanks, Johnny. A big thanks to Henry for joining us, and thanks to all you guys for listening. Make sure you hit subscribe, leave us a nice review if you can, check us out on Rugby Pass and on YouTube, and we'll be back with another episode next week. Au revoir, Johnny.
Cheers, mate.